Hello and welcome everybody to Practical Inclusion. Today we're going to talk about a topic that I think is really important and perhaps we're not giving enough airplay, as many of the topics that we discuss on this show over the last year and a half. I was just talking to our guest today, and I have been doing this for about a year and a half, but I've been a little slack lately, so I apologise to those who have been missing out on these episodes and really rely on them. I want to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that I live, work and play on, which is the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and a big call out to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are joining us today. Lyndal and Di, did you want to acknowledge the country that you're on today?
Yeah, we're on the same country, not far from the water, but also the land of the Wadawurrung people from the Kulin Nation. So proudly sitting here and being part of the experience.
I haven't had too many people from the same country on the show, so it's really nice. We're both sitting on that same beautiful country. Yeah. Right, well, as usual, I'm going to throw it straight over to you two to introduce yourselves through story and tell us about where you fit into the inclusion puzzle and why you're passionate about what you're doing and what it is that you're doing and we're going to talk about today.
Thanks, Bree. Yeah, we're so happy to be here, and we're really grateful for this platform that you've created and everything that you provide through this platform to give people a voice.
Seconded.
Yeah. So we're people that work together. You can probably see we're, we sit together quite often and do a lot of work together. And in the space that we work in, it's to do with learning and accessible and inclusive learning. So I might introduce myself first. I'm Lyndal Box, and I have a business called LB Learning Solutions. And for a very long time, in fact, all of my working career, I've been a learning and development professional. But it was probably only in the last 8 years that I was really woken up to what I needed to be doing to make sure that the learning I was designing was accessible for everyone. And that happened for me when I took up a job at the NDIA, or the NDIS, as so many people know it, where I was working amongst a really mixed ability range of people with all different experiences and backgrounds, and where people freely challenged things that weren't being done well. And working in the role I was working in, we were challenged a lot. We were challenged a lot by the people surrounding us and also the people who were part of the NDIS environment, the greater world of NDIS, because the learning that we were creating quite often couldn't be navigated by some of our people. And that's not good enough. And, in that environment, it's absolutely not good enough, but in any environment it isn't. And so after I left and started working for another provider, who was a registered training organisation, and they were looking to roll out their first learning management system and their first authoring tool and start doing their e-learning work and going online. I started asking them questions about the accessibility, and they didn't have the answers, and nor did the provider who was providing them with the platform. So it's at that time that I started to reach out to people in that organisation, say, who are your users? Who are your people? And through those people, I was lucky enough to meet Di. And Di came along and did some testing for us of that platform and provided some amazing user experience insights. And we worked together so well, and I learned so much from that experience that we've continued to work together ever since. And both of us really highly value that accessibility for learning for every learner. And we focus a lot on the learner experience for people who are blind or vision impaired. But we also think about who all our other users are, because we know that every user who has a need might not necessarily be catered to if we're not thinking about them. So that's my background. I might just ask Di to...
I was going to say, and how we met and what we were testing is to do with vision impairment. But I'll just go back. I am blind. I just see the difference between light and dark, and I've got all swirls around in my eyes, which are a bit yellowy at the moment. They change colours. I've got a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, and I was diagnosed when I was 24. Never heard of it. It's supposed to be genetic. But I have recently found out that my mother and father had a recessive gene, which came out dominant in me. And there was one part of it that was Mel not sitting right. So so one gene caused me to slowly lose my eyesight over time. I didn't let it stop me. I raised 2 children. I worked at CRS. I don't know if anyone knows or remembers that. It's Employment Service for People with Disability, but it was a government organisation that has since folded up. I've volunteered at WIRE, Women's Information Referral Exchange. I have studied at, I won't say where, I've done a social work degree with honours. Then I did a PhD. I worked at Vision Australia, and then I was lecturing at university. As my brain's going through, oh my God, you don't think you've done much, but at NDIA for a little while. So that was interesting as well. And what Linda was saying about, it's we need to cater to all people. I can honestly say the people in there were genuinely interested and wanted to learn about the diversity, because the values of the NDIA is, equality, transparency, and working with, rather than over, which was just lovely. And I had a really good working experience there. But I'm getting a little bit older, and I just thought, what is it that I want to do now? So I'm starting to build a business with a couple of friends, and I want to get into counselling. So that's me in a nutshell. And the accessibility for screen readers on the computer is what I work with Lyndal to make sure that it is all accessible. So yeah.
Yeah, amazing. That's, as you start talking it through, and that.
Yeah.
I just want to say to everybody watching, listening in, whether you're listening in live or on the replay, please shoot any questions that you have into the comments, and we'll make sure that we get to them as much as we can. But I'll kick us off with a question. I'm really interested around that. If we focus on that screen reader piece at the moment, what are the main things that people are doing wrong when it comes to making these learning programs accessible for people who do have who are blind?
Yeah, there's one website that I'm thinking of at the moment. I won't say who it is because I don't want to, sort of blame anyone. But just to order something online, I really have to persist to get where I'm going, because links are not named properly. It's just very, very information overload. It's not simple to follow. Links, like I say, they may not work sometimes, because when these things are tested, they'll be tested with a mouse, but I use a keyboard because I can't see the cursor on the screen. So that's one of the things is, to ensure that the sites and that are tested with a keyboard. And a lot of people don't know the keystrokes, so it was actually good at NDIA because they were even starting to learn some of the keystrokes. Documents, usually Word is fine. If there's a graphic there, which is a picture, if it's not described, it'll just JAWS, which is the screen reader that I use, will say, give me the dimensions of the graphic, but it won't tell me what's in the graphic because JAWS can't read images. It can read text. PDFs, if they're saved as an image, again, that's a picture. You can't read it.
And so on that, this is a classic example. It's like, I was going to say, actually, when you asked that question, Bree, that the biggest issue that we have is that people make assumptions, and we all make assumptions. But an assumption that's often made with PDF is that if I make a beautiful Word document and I've done the accessibility checker and it's given me a green tick, I know that it's fine then if I go and save it as a PDF. But as Diane said, when you save a PDF, essentially you're saving an image file. So all of that good work that was done in the Word document is lost because the whole document has been saved as an image. And PDFs have far more complexities than that, but that's probably the simplest one to explain. And it's a big assumption that many of us make. I've made all this work, I'll just PDF it.
Well, and they PDF it because they think it's secure, that it can't be changed, but it can.
At that once upon a time, you couldn't edit a PDF. Now you can.
Yeah. But now you can, and there's different ways that I have to get around it. Adobe will convert it to Word, and like Lyndal said, a lot of the the formatting will be lost, and it even says that, it announces that the formatting maybe different due to the conversion. Even then, I would have to go and get Open Book, I think it was called, and then that can convert it if I've got nowhere else to go. That can be quite terrible, that conversion, but at least I can read something.
And all of that can be overcome by someone learning how to tag a PDF. And that's a skill, and it's a skill, as you've said, Bree, before, things, sometimes people say, and we might have said this off air before we started, but people say it costs too much or it takes too long to, to make adjustments for people with a disability. But it's like, hang on a minute. If you don't do that, it's going to be a poor user experience for just about everybody. And people haven't realised that that's the case, because you really should be bookmarking and tagging your PDFs anyway. The other thing is that you're actually blocking people from using it. So people like Di, who, as you can tell, is a very capable person, is rendered incapable simply by design. And that design, whether it's just saved as an image, could be just a little bit tweaked and tagged and done properly, and all of a sudden she can access it just like everyone else.
So it's a change of habit, which might not cost enough or much, but in the long run, if I'm buying something online, they're going to get my money, aren't they?
And this is something that often isn't thought about, and we like to bring it up a lot, Bree, which is that good design means that you're getting your whole market audience. And poor design means that people who've got money to spend are not going to consume from you. And the word of mouth in the community out there for people who use keyboard navigation, who use assistive technology, it gets around real fast. It's like, have you tried this supermarket? Because you can buy their stuff online much quicker than you can buy it through that supermarket. Or, this certain provider of online shopping is fabulous. It's really easy to use, and they don't use old versions of CAPTCHA. So I know a lot of people like to use CAPTCHA as a security measure for purchasing and online forums, but
is that I'm Not a Robot?
That's I'm Not a Robot.
That is thank God, getting much better, because you have to check. You don't have to do an audio or a visual test, and a lot of them now I've noticed. But the audio, oh my God, think, what was that?
And some ones, even if you could navigate all of those things, and they're frustrating for many users and regardless, but even if you could navigate the whole lot and do it with a screen reader or other forms of assistive technology, there were bots sitting in the background, and I know the latest versions have improved it, but there were bots sitting in the background that were detecting the way people were navigating, and they would assume that because someone's navigating using a keyboard, that it's a bot, like that's some sort of automated thing, and they would block people from making a purchase right at the 11th hour, or they block them from subscribing to
frustrating.
So those things still exist if people have got old versions of CAPTCHA online.
Right. And that's useful even if you're not selling something, if you're setting up an event that you're getting people to register for, or
some of those email subscription platforms, of which I won't name, but some of them have also used it, and so unknowingly people are using those subscription platforms that are requiring a CAPTCHA to be used that's an old version, and it stops people like Di from joining their subscription list.
I just want to add, while you're talking, I was thinking of this. Lyndal and I work really well together, because there might be something that I'm testing that she can see on the screen, but I can't. So I'm just testing on what is available to me. But Lyndal said, "Oh, what about this here? What about what?" So we've no, it's not accessible. So it's really good. And I've done testing on computers in quite a few organisations, and I've done it by myself. When Lyndal and I do it, like I say, it's more thorough. I will do a report. It's more thorough, but it grabs everything. Do you know what I mean? It's not just left up to me to guess what's on that screen. So
if you can't see it, you don't know what.
Am I missing? I don't know if I'm missing it or not.
And it falls back to that assumption thing, doesn't it? So that we can make assumptions about, well, okay, the great thing to do is, well, we've got something ready to go and we want to test it, so we'll get Di to test it. All right, well, Di is just one user, so we need to think about all the users in the audience, but we also need to make sure that the testing is done properly too. So we actually capture what's missing and what needs to be better and what could be improved.
And that is happening.
That's a really good point. Just had a question come through, so I'm going to pop that up. And then I'll ask my next one. So Simon said, what accessibility standard would you say developers should be aspiring towards? We, Kineo courses, align to the WCAG 2.1 AA. Should we do more?
That's a really good question.
And I'm going to let you answer that.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks,
Yep.
Simon. It's a great question. And it doesn't have a simple answer because if people aren't familiar with what Bree's just read out, WCAG is short for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And those guidelines are an international standard set by the World Wide Web Consortium. They're recognised internationally. And in fact, our law here in Australia, while it doesn't directly reference it, it does refer to it when it comes to points where people are challenged when things aren't accessible. So it's a really important guideline. And yes, we should try to achieve the guidelines as best we can. And 2.1, version 2.1 is where we're at the moment. There are about to be guidelines released in June, we think, of level 2.2. So there's more to come. They're just a bit of refinement of the existing guidelines. And then there's levels within those guidelines. So level A is a basic bare minimum that everybody needs to meet. Level AA, if we're proud of what we do, if you're a member of a government organisation anywhere in Australia, we must meet level AA, which is the next level of standard, which is a bit more than the bare minimum, but it's really just making sure that people can access things. And AAA standards are best practice. It's like what we would aspire to, and a lot of organisations can meet it, but some can't due to a number of reasons, perhaps due to technology, or for instance, the ability to access signers for sign language for videos and things like that. So aspiring to AA is fantastic, but I would say don't stop there, because we also have a digital service standard in Australia that's set by the Australian government that we need to think about. And depending on which state we're in, there are also accessibility guidelines that government and councils need to think about and adhere to if you're a representative of them or if you do work for them. But I want to jump to what's more important than all of those things, and that is these are all boxes to tick. They're all compliance related, but they're not people. So my thing would be, yes, go for WCAG 2.1 AA. I think that's fantastic, but it means nothing unless you're testing it real people, because user experience is what matters.
That's a really good reminder, because it's something that's true for all our inclusion work, right, is to make sure we're focusing on the people. Thanks, Simon, for the question, and I know I need to get back to you. You've sent me an email, so I will do that. So just maybe a little bit, just before we move on to some other stuff, just covering off that. We know that organisations are required to, or many organisations, depending on where they sit and what legislation applies to them, that they're required to have a disability access and inclusion plan. My experience is that many of those organisations, their inclusion plans are expired, well and truly, and they haven't got around to doing the next one. With those standards that you're talking about, what's your experience in terms of how many organisations are actually kind of meeting those minimum standards currently, do you think?
It's probably a sad moment to reflect at the moment, but not enough, and certainly not all that are required to. And I would go further to say that there's possibly even a lot of organisations that churn out a lot of content that doesn't get tested at all. And I know that happens not with bad intent. It's usually due to time pressures and, things that are factors that, everyone has to deal with in their own workplaces. But I think what's worth reflecting on that is that when that happens, often the rework that occurs later, it's intangible how much extra rework there is, but that would outweigh the amount of time that it would take just to get it right in the first place.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking when Lyndal was talking. I actually said to someone, an organisation that I did some testing for, and they were nearly ready to put out their platform, and they were ticking a box to say it's been checked for accessibility. And I said, you're not going to get this right until you work that accessibility into the building of what you're doing. Like there's stuff there that needed to be fixed, but they couldn't, but they ticked the accessibility box, so outsiders would say, yes, it's been checked, but in reality, it's still not to what it should be.
Yeah. In the requirements. Yeah. Okay. And that's another thing that's quite common, isn't it, across the inclusion world, when we do have these check boxes or tick boxes or accreditation programs that they don't necessarily mean that we're really doing the work and creating that.
I don't think it's because people don't want to do it. I just think they don't really understand the importance of it, and that's why I love doing things like this, to educate people, to open the door into, you know, someone else's world and the importance that it does create. You know, like people with dyslexia, you know, they can be looking at a screen, but they need to invert the black and white or have a lighter colour background so that, you know, different contrasts and things like that. That can be huge. That can be huge for them. So, you know, I think it's something, and I think it is stepping up. I think it is in people's minds more so now. I've lost my sight for quite a few years now, and I can see the changes that are happening, and we're headed in the right way, but we've still got a long way to go. So, yeah.
Can I get you then to let's shift into that space of what organisations can be doing? I know you've got 5 tips that you can give us to really get people started on the right path towards creating this digital accessibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting, it's the hot topic of our conversation. The very first and the best tip we can advise anyone is to know who your learners are, or whatever your audience is, who your users are. Because if you know who they are, you can design for them, you can cater for them, and you can make sure that what you're doing from the very outset is going to be, you know, down the right path. And the thing that we're speaking about now, you know, this whole thing of ticking the box, we might tick the box now because we're in a hurry, but it comes to the time where people start using it, and then there might be complaints and there might be issues, and potentially even if somebody wants to be litigious about it, and generally Australians aren't, but there will come a time where they become more so. They might take you to court if you're not meeting the basic standards. And there's a lot to lose in that space. So I think, you know, in terms of getting it right and doing the right thing, we want to do that. But also, you know, there's a bit of a stick out there if we don't. So making sure you know who your users are is our number 1 tip. And design with all your users in mind from the outset, and you can't go wrong. But also understanding that if you do good design, everyone benefits. And we can talk about that for a couple of our other tips in a minute. And one other thing to mention in that little space and that 1 tip about who your learners and users are, one of the things that people have done in the past to cater for accessibility, and usually this is post-dated, you know, retrofit, is to create a different version of something. It's like, we'll create the version for normal people, and then we'll create the other version for everybody else. That's not okay. It actually is not helpful. But if we do good design right from the start, and we can help people to do good design, you know, if you think about it, you can do good design. If you do it from the start, you're not going to have any of those issues. You don't have duplicates. You don't have to recreate your things twice. And you don't, you know, when you have to change something down the track, you don't have 2 versions that you've got to work with.
It's expensive in the long run.
It is. So that's our number 1 tip, right?
Great. What's number 2? Hit it.
Number two is to do user experience testing, but we add an extra bit in that and we say it's got to be real. Because one of the things that often happens is that we'll go, I'm in a hurry, we'll do some user experience testing. So that person in the office, can you just check it for us? And there's our user experience. Or I'll take it home and I'll get, you know, brother, sister, you know, someone down the road, check it. And that's our user experience. But we know full well that if we actually reach out to our real users, we'll find out all sorts of amazing things. And, you know, Di, you can speak about some of the experiences that you've had of things that you've found. You know, I'm trying to, sorry, I put you on the spot.
Oh, yeah, well, my brain's going, what?
We find things all the time, basically.
Yeah.
I might create a document. Look, I'm pretty well versed in creating an accessible document. I can do that. It's what I do for a living, and I train other people to learn how to do it too. But sometimes I'll put together a document and I'll just do, you know, test here and there. I'll check with a friend who's dyslexic. I'll check, and then I'll get Di to check it. And she'll say, actually, do you know that when you get to this line, my screen reader's sending me all this gobbledygook. It's saying hashtag this and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, why is it doing that? And it could be something as simple as the formatting's not cleared in the background and I didn't realise.
Yours will pick up things in the background as well. I did one learning thing, and it was reading out different things. And the person who came in to check it in with me, she said, it's not reading what's on the screen. It's reading questions that are not related to what was on the screen that was behind the background. Yeah. So, you know, just
it's always worth doing that testing.
Yeah.
So real testing is number 2.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about real testing. Why don't I engage you to do my website? It's apparently digitally accessible, but I imagine you'll find some things. So
happy to do that. And mind you, I had a quick look previously, and you've got some wonderful accessibility settings. So I guess some pretty good features there. But happy to do that testing. And
let's do that. And we'll write an article about it.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I've been doing some on my own. Mine own is going through a rebuild because it needed it. So, you know, and even things like adding a digital accessibility statement, which previously I hadn't had. So, you know, there's always room for improvement for all of us.
Excellent. I know we're getting close to time. I think we've got 4 minutes and we've got 3 tips.
4, 5.
Yeah, all right. 3. This is a simple one. We've covered it already. Describe images. So any images that you use, make sure they're described. This is for digital.
That's alt text.
Alternative text in the background. Number 4 is think about how people consume your media content. And we are speaking, you know, primarily about screen readers, and so Di, you know, will be able to see visually what's on the screen, and we can do all sorts of amazing things now quite easily with technology like audio descriptions, and we can do transcripts. We can do captions for people who are hearing impaired. But the benefit of using those things is not only for people who have to have it, it's for all of us. And so I'm thinking about the way I consume media. I often consume media with the sound off, so I use those captions. Or I'm in a hurry and I'll refer to a transcript instead of watching the whole video because it's time consuming. Can I explain
what audio description is? An ABC provide it now, and you'll hear her crunching. That's my guide dog crunching her bone down there. She's wanting attention. But yeah, so you'll hear it. They'll say that this show has been described for people with vision impairments. So in spots that are just got like music, or, you know, the camera scanning across whatever, the voice will describe to you, you know, if you've got that describe to you what other people are looking at. So the movies have usually got a couple of cinemas with that function in it, and it's really good. So,
and it's now a level AA requirement for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So it's something that a lot of people might not be aware of, but if you're creating video content, it's something you need to think about. So we do number 5. Yeah, number 5 is be curious. Be curious. And that's that, you know, just ask yourself those questions. If I'm going to implement a new platform or some new software, or I'm going to try a new template, it needs to be tested. Like, have that question in your mind, like, what would happen if this person uses it, how are they going to experience it? And to be able to think of those things ahead of time can save you a lot of pain later.
I think no question is silly. You know, any question is on the right track. And that's why I like working with Lyndal too, because hopefully people see us as, you know, a safe space that, you know, you can sort of work towards that accessibility. So...
Great. And we've just had a question come through saying, this is very informative, thank you. Would you have references for making an online learning course accessible?
Wow, we've got 2 minutes.
Contact Lyndal.
Have a conversation. Happy to. But there's a lot to think about, and there's usually a lot of errors that people make. And I'll just give you one example. In an online learning course, one of the common things that people do is drag and drop assessments. There are huge amounts of problems with those depending on the authoring tool. So just be careful what you're doing, and if you're not sure, you know, ask somebody, get some advice, do some testing, because it's easy to come undone with things like that if you're not, because the functions of the tool are all there, they're not necessarily all accessible.
And I will say this, that JAWS does not drag.
No.
If you've got to match up your things and it says just drag, you know, to the right, but no, JAWS doesn't drag. So,
Right. So you can't actually, wow.
You can't move them.
I think that comment is just spot on. This has been so informative for me, as absolutely. So thank you for giving us, sharing all that information with us. And obviously reach out to both Lyndal and Di if you do want to learn more or engage their services to test some of the things that you have and to, as you say, maybe design from the beginning in a way that is accessible, so not having to retrofit all the time. And I think one thing that I do all the time now is actually ask providers, is your product accessible, so that regardless of whether it's something that I'm going to be using externally, but at least that gives the question back. It's the same with LGBTI inclusion, right? If you come across a form and it only has 2 spaces for gender, regardless of whether you need the third option or not, ask, because that's how you can be an ally to get people to start thinking. And the more people question and ask for digital accessibility, the more pressure there is on those organisations to do that work and get it done. So thank you so much for sharing what you have today. Please, everybody, feel free to engage in the comments. And thanks, Jill, the guide dog, and ask goodbye. Brilliant. And I hope to be back on here next week with another guest. So for all of you who are perhaps new to listening in, try and do these as regularly as possible. If you have a guest or a topic that you'd love us to get on and discuss, please send that through, and we'll do our best to get to that topic this year. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Bree.